Welcome back to the Tin Dog Podcast. This time we'll be covering Sylvester McCoy's time at the helm, being the Seventh Doctor. Let's jump straight in with Time and the Rani. Time and the Rani has a regeneration sequence at the very beginning. You were disturbed by the fact that there was a new Doctor and Colin hadn't really been given his go, but you were pleased the series hadn't been cancelled. And you were a little bit disappointed that it was on midweek again, but, you were just pleased. You hadn't really seen much of McCoy in other things. You had seen him on Tiswas, and you'd seen him on Jigsaw, admittedly kids stuff. You had heard on the grapevine that he was a good actor, although a little bit Scottish. So a Doctor with an accent, although as many Americans would see him just somebody who was from the UK, was a little bit disconcerting. And so, Colin, who'd recently been sacked, said, I don't really want to do that regeneration sequence, and God bless him, I'm completely behind him on that one. It's nice to have some standards. Why did that sound awful? We're back in Time and the Rani. And so, Sylvester McCoy dons Colin's costume, lies on the floor, puts on a blonde wig, and has a big blurry face, and then eventually takes the wig off and looks just like Sylvester McCoy. Obviously, as with a lot of regeneration stories, the Doctor's gone a bit loopy. It became a bit of a tradition at this point for the Doctor to be a bit loopy after regeneration, but that's fine. His loopiness, however, didn't fade for nearly a year and a half. We did have Bonnie Langford still. Yes, I'm calm, I can still say the name. And they were foiling a plot by the Rani to do something with enormous brains. Yeah, it's not a fabulously well thought out story, but Bonnie Langford is captured in an enormous force bubble and thrown against a wall, so it's worth seeing just for that. Sylvester couldn't decide whether to wear his glasses or not, so in many long shots you can actually see the Doctor wearing glasses until the close-ups when suddenly he's not. Not the sort of thing you can really get rid of. By this point, of course, they had decided to get rid of Langford, so in many respects she was only really there for 5 stories. 5? It seemed like so much longer. Paradise Towers is a very nice story. If it was filmed today, I could imagine it being even darker. However, it is let down by one startling performance. Richard Briers, encouraged by the producer at the time to not tone it down in a similar to Brian Blessed kind of a way, a perfectly good performer, a truly excellent actor, unfortunately is pushed a little bit too far and created a hideous caricature. We're presented with a character called the Caretaker. Now in this story, the Doctor is looking for a holiday, as the beginning of so many stories are, and the Doctor and Mel arrive in what's meant to be a wonderful paradise. But in fact, instead you find that it's a decaying tower block. In this tower block there are cleaning robots which attack you, and the staff who are trying just to keep everyone in their place, and people who live there have turned into cannibals, and it's a fine dystopia. Most of the adults have gone off to fight a war and lost. It's fairly standard stuff. Not worth ignoring though. However, Delta and the Bannermen that follows it is a largely confusing story which unfortunately contains Ken Dodd. Ken Dodd is not a crime anymore. He's been decriminalised and no longer does shows of more than 19 hours. For those of you not familiar with who Ken Dodd is, he's a 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s longevity popular family comedian. I've seen him live once. He was extremely funny, and I'm not going to pretend I haven't. Well worth seeing, a lot funnier than people make out. And in many respects, his comedy is more similar to The Goons than it would be to any other full-on comedian, which I guess counts for his longevity. I'm digressing, aren't I? You've caught me out. This story consists of the Doctor and some aliens both being diverted to a 1950s holiday camp similar to the TV series Heidi High, where there is a bounty hunter and some aliens and an alien princess who needs rescuing. Quite a nice little idea. It did take a long time to come out on VHS, and that's usually not a good or indeed positive sign. I think it's possibly because they realised that things with Bonnie Langford in just didn't sell too well. Bonnie Langford did leave at the next story, Dragonfire. Dragonfire is when Doctor Who really came back to us. It was as good as it had ever been in Dragonfire. Sablong Glips returns, and of course we are now introduced to Ace. Mel leaves with Sablon at the end of the story, so if you are allergic to Bonnie Langford, now is a good time to jump back into the series. Dragonfire is a lovely, lovely story. It was one of my favourites, and when it came out on VHS, I did watch it until the tape wore out. Sophie Aldred's performance, straight off, is very, very good. She captures the role, she makes it her own, and she defines herself who is someone other than people who've gone before. The annoying habit of calling the Doctor Professor until she's upset or in danger when she calls him Doctor is acceptable, and you can live with it. It was a shorthand way of making sure that the very small kids kind of knew what was going on. The dragon isn't great. It's definitely a bloke in a suit. But one scene where somebody is exposed to pure sunlight and melts is great. So great that many people complained, which is always a good sign. That's the end of that season, so it's time for season 25, Remembrance of the Daleks. Ah yes, every good Doctor deserves a nice story with the Daleks, and that's what we got. We got something, again, that was a little bit continuity heavy, and it's nice to see that Russell got away from that. Ish. We're presented again with two Dalek factions, both on Earth, to try and pick up something called the Hand of Omega. The Hand of Omega apparently was left by the first Doctor, so it gives a nice continuity circle for the whole show. An ideal place indeed to finish Doctor Who if you just saw it as a history of the Daleks. Or perhaps not. The Hand of Omega is used by Davros, who is now just a head in a ball. Well, a ball, an Emperor Dalek ball, if you see what I mean. Oh, just watch the show. You know you'll enjoy it. It's got explosions, it's got something called the Heavy Weapons Dalek, which is basically a Dalek that has no sucker, it's just a big gun, well worth seeing, and something that sadly has not been repeated, because now Daleks all look like Daleks with different hand attachments. In the novelisation, the Heavy Weapons Dalek was actually a Dalek that was feared by other Daleks, and was seen as a bit of a nutcase, because he liked guns even more than normal Daleks did. That's a nice bit of writing. Crashing on. Of course, that story also contained the very first flying Dalek, so just from a historical point of view it's well worth seeing. Again, it's got the guy from Grange Hill, who I keep seeming to refer to, who keeps coming back, who's still a very good actor. We're followed by the Happiness Patrol. Now, the Happiness Patrol, what can you say about this, other than Candyman? Yeah. If you say Candyman 3 times, a Doctor Who fan comes up to clout you around the head. Or perhaps not. The Happiness Patrol had some lovely ideas. The Doctor turns up on a small planet and tries to bring about revolution overnight. Sounds good. He's flexing his muscles. This is the beginning of the Dark Doctor times. But of course, well, not really. We did have a lot of that with the Dalek story. I'm sorry, I don't really want to talk about the Happiness Patrol. The Candyman. It made people laugh at you if you were a Doctor Who fan. Oh, the horror. It was not a good monster. It was not well designed. It was Bertie Bassett. The idea behind it was nice. He was a killer robot who happened to just look cute. Let's face it, it had been done before with the Meep in the comics to a lot more success. I'm sorry, I just can't talk about this story. I don't even want to think about it. Because it brings us so nicely to Silver Nemesis and the return of Cybermen. We've got Nazis, we've got Cybermen, we've got robots from Gallifrey, we've got absolutely no sense whatsoever happening in this story. It is one of those classic Doctor Who's let's chuck everything in. Oddly, by this point in the Cyberman's history, they're completely allergic to gold in a kind of a crap kid who's not very good at sports kind of a way. Show them a picture of gold and they'll run away. They think it's radioactive, they don't know what's going on. The Cybermen are quite easy to defeat. Silver Nemesis, admittedly it was the Silver Anniversary story, that's why the box was shiny and green. Yeah, it's a good tale as long as you kind of leave your brain in neutral. Why there's Nazis in it is kind of not really here nor there. But watch it, let it wash over you. It's not a bad story. Some of the spaceships are quite nice. However, it's followed by the up and downness of this season, the greatest show in the galaxy. Some fans point out that characters in the greatest show of the galaxy are just metaphors for fans of Doctor Who. Oh, it's not as good as it used to be. But you know, by this point in Doctor Who's history, there were times when you really did think it's not as good as it used to be. Perhaps it was because we were growing up. Perhaps it's because the budgets had been cut. Or perhaps it was something else. I don't know. I'll never know now. The greatest show in the galaxy is again confusing. It's got werewolves, it's got circuses, it's got scary clowns. Everyone likes a scary clown, unless you're scared by them, and then everyone's scared by a scary clown. And then there's kites, which are being used as surveillance robots. Yeah, that's not even trying, is it? It does have a very scary robot who's a bus conductor. Yes, a bus conductor. Shall we just leave it there? Look, watch Greatest Show in the Galaxy, and if you know exactly what's happening at the end and can explain it to me, I'd really be quite grateful, because I was watching, I've watched tapes of it since, and I have absolutely no idea what was going on. Where did the gods of Ragnarok come from? What were they doing? What's the Doctor doing for them? Does he play the spoons at some point? Can you see what I mean? Of course, season 25 by default is followed by season 26. We're panicking by this point. People have said that the series is on its last legs. It may be cancelled. Some people would be pleased at this, though not us. Battlefield starts well. Battlefield is wonderful. The Doctor is Merlin. We've got Arthurian legend, we've got Doctor Who legend, we've got them together, we've got the Brigadier. It's enough nod to the past for you to live with it, but it's also enough nods to the future and the possible future of the character of the Doctor for you to live quite happily with it. I strongly recommend Battlefield. Well worth seeing. It kind of messes with unit continuity a little bit and unit dating. Oh, there's a whole podcast going to have to be dedicated to that. Followed by the extremely odd and the extremely enjoyable Ghostlight. A lot of people don't like this. It's only 3 episodes long, and you do think it should have been 4, just so that you've got any idea what's going on. It's fast-paced, although feels quite slow. It feels like you're understanding it at the time until you sit back and try and figure it out. It's to do with evolution, it's to do with assassination, it's to do with the Victorian view of the world, which for many people is still the English view of the world, if you see what I mean, if you happen to live here. Or not. Watch Ghostlight. You might be confused, but you might just love it. Curse of Fenric, 3 great stories in a row. Curse of Fenric's brilliant. You've got great character development in Dorothy, or Ace. You've got some wonderful storylines. You've got the Hemivores, which are vampires. Yeah, I know, there's a whole new season thing. Let's not go there. And they're really well done. Nicholas Parsons, the quiz game host, makes a very good performance, but then again he was an actor before he became a game show host. It's a wonderful performance, it's very well done. It's got some fabulous moments. I strongly recommend this. We've got 3 great stories, and then we've got the last ever Doctor Who story. God, do you remember when that was true? Do you remember when, for 6 years, that was it? The last ever Doctor Who story was survival. Would the show survive? We just don't know. Not a bad story, but not as good as the 3 that had gone before it, and I suspect it suffers for that. It's got cat people on horseback, it's got the Master, who's gone savage, but let's face it, he's been killed off so many times in other stories, you just get annoyed that he's come back these days. The Master's there. He's with us, and that's fine. It's got Hale and Pace again, 2 guest star comedians who were in it for no adequately explored reason, but you can forgive that. And then, at the very end, there's a speech, recorded afterwards, and you can kind of tell because of the sound quality, where the Doctor says, "Come on, Ace, let's go somewhere the tea's getting cold." And that was it. That was the end of Doctor Who. We'd gone for years. We'd got all the way to the end. We're 1 month off the end of 1989. We're almost in 1990, and Sylvester McCoy bids us farewell, and so does the series. Of course, history has shown us that, after that, there is one more showing for McCoy. He gets to come back in 1996 for the McGann movie. We'll call it the McGann movie because it has lots of different names. Now, the next cast will be all about Paul McGann's time. However, with him just doing the one televised story, I will review that at the beginning and then talk about McGann's other seasons, which he's done for Big Finish and BBC 7, which are admittedly audio. But as Doctor Who has many stories which only exist on audio format, I like to believe that the McGann stories are really season 31, 32 and 33. That's debatable, but it's something I'm going to cover. It's my podcast, and if you've got any complaints, feel free to email me. It's tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. So, I think it's time for marks out of 10. First off, with Time and the Rani, I'm giving it a 6. A good 6. Paradise Towers, it's a 7. And Delta and the Bannermen, 6.5. Let's face it, it's better than Time and the Rani, but not as good as Paradise Towers. Dragonfire, Ace's first performance, and Bye Bye Langford, we're going to give it an 8. Remembrance of the Daleks, it's a 9. Bordering on an 8. The Happiness Patrol, it's a 7. Silver Nemesis, 7.5. Why did I give the Happiness Patrol a 7? I genuinely have no idea. It deserves a 6. Let's give it a 6, shall we? I know what gave it the 7. Fifi the dog puppet. Susan Moore's particularly well thought out puppet. It's a great prop. Silver Nemesis, 7.5. It's a Cyberman story, always worth seeing, and the greatest show in the galaxy, a 6. And then finally, the best season of McCoy, Battlefield, a 9. Ghostlight, 8.5. Curse of Fenric, a 9. Survival, a 7. It would have been an 8, and let's face it, I could easily make it an 8. It is my scoring system after all. Only for the last final speech, because somewhere the tea really is getting cold. Be seeing you. You have been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. If you have been affected by anything discussed in this show, a helpline has definitely not been set up. However, you can email us at tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk or leave a comment or a picture at our website www.tin-dog.co.uk. Doctor Who is a registered trademark of the BBC and they'll come round and bite you if you misuse it. No infringement is intended.